They found Ranger Mike Hollis's body 3 days after he went missing, or at least what was left of it. His remains were scattered across a half-mile stretch of the Appalachian Trail near McAfee Knob in Virginia. The official report called it an animal attack, likely a black bear, but I know better. The wounds weren't consistent with bear claws or teeth. His limbs had been pulled apart with surgical precision, like someone had carefully mapped out exactly where each joint connected and then applied just the right amount of force to separate them. And there was the matter of his ranger logbook, the one thing completely intact among the carnage. The pages were blank, except for a single line written in handwriting that wasn't Mike's. He didn't follow the rules. That was 6 months ago. The Forest Service conducted their investigation, deemed it a tragic wildlife encounter, and moved on. But I couldn't. Mike was my mentor, the one who trained me when I first joined the service 3 years ago. He knew the Appalachian Trail better than anyone. Over 2,190 miles from Georgia to Maine, and he respected the wilderness. Mike wouldn't have made the kind of rookie mistake that gets you killed by wildlife. I kept digging, reviewing his final radio transmissions, interviewing hikers who'd seen him on his last patrol, and searching the area where they found his remains. That's when I discovered the weathered journal wedged into a hollow tree about a quarter-mile from the scene. Its pages contained a handwritten list titled Rules for Rangers, Appalachian Special Assignment, with Mike's initials at the bottom. Reading through those 9 rules, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn mountain air. They were bizarre, nonsensical, and terrifying in their specificity. I initially thought it was some kind of joke, or maybe Mike had been dabbling in creative writing. Then I found the official Forest Service memorandum tucked into the back of the journal. Dated 1974, it confirmed the rules were real, classified, and absolutely necessary for survival. I should have turned everything over to my supervisors immediately, but something stopped me. The memo specifically warned against sharing the rules with unauthorized personnel, which apparently included most of Forest Service management. Instead, it instructed finding the keeper of the trail who would provide proper orientation. That's when I remembered the strange assignment Mike had received 2 weeks before his death. Temporary transfer to a special unit I'd never heard of before. He'd been excited, but mysteriously tight-lipped about it. "It's the assignment I've been waiting for my whole career," he told me the day before he left. "If all goes well, I'll bring you on board too." Those were the last words he ever said to me. Hello, viewers. If you wish your stories or experiences to be narrated by me, share them on our own subreddit, which you can join from the description below. I will pick the stories from the community and narrate them, and every once in a while, we will host a 3-hour story compilation. The next day, I requested transfer to the same special assignment. 3 rejection letters and countless phone calls later, I finally received a plain envelope containing nothing but a set of coordinates in the Blue Ridge Mountains and a date, tomorrow. What I'm about to tell you is the truth about what happened during my first month on special assignment with the Appalachian Trail Management Unit. I'm recording this now because I don't know if I'll make it through tonight. If you're reading this and you work for the Forest Service, particularly on the Appalachian Trail, you need these 9 rules. Your life depends on it. And God help me, I think I just broke rule number 7. The coordinates led me to a trailhead near the town of Damascus, Virginia, Trail Town, USA, they call it. A popular spot where thousands of hikers pass through each year during their journey along the AT. But the actual meeting point was about 2 miles off the main trail, along an unmarked path that didn't appear on any of my maps. I arrived early, my backpack loaded with standard ranger gear plus the journal I'd found. The morning fog clung to the ground, turning the forest into something from a fairy tale. Not the Disney kind, but the original Brothers Grimm stories, where people disappeared and children got eaten. At precisely 7 a.m., an older man emerged from between two ancient oak trees. He wore the standard Forest Service uniform, but something about him seemed off. Maybe it was the way he moved, too fluid, too purposeful, or the fact that despite the dense underbrush, not a single leaf or twig crunched beneath his boots. "Ranger Jenkins," he said, not a question, but a statement. "I'm Ranger Howard Blackwood. I'll be your orientation officer." I extended my hand. "Nice to meet you, sir." He ignored my outstretched hand. "You requested this assignment because of Ranger Hollis." Again, not a question. "Yes, sir. Mike was my mentor. I want to understand what happened to him." Blackwood's expression didn't change. What happened to Ranger Hollis was unfortunate but preventable. He forgot the rules. A cold knot formed in my stomach. "You mean these rules?" I pulled out Mike's journal. For the first time, Blackwood showed emotion. A flash of surprise quickly replaced by something darker. "Where did you get that?" His voice remained calm, but his hand moved subtly toward his belt. "Found it near where they discovered Mike's body." He extended his hand. "I'll take that now." "With all due respect, sir, I'd like to keep it. For Mike." We stood there, the tension building between us, until Blackwood finally nodded. "Very well. But understand that having those rules doesn't mean you comprehend them. That's what orientation is for." He turned and began walking deeper into the forest. "Follow me. Stay exactly 10 paces behind at all times." That was my first exposure to the rules in action, though I didn't realize it then. We hiked for nearly an hour, moving away from the established trail into increasingly dense forest. The trees grew older here, massive trunks covered in thick moss. I noticed we were following a subtle path marked by small stacks of 3 rocks, trail markers invisible to anyone not looking for them. "The Appalachian Trail is old," Blackwood said without turning around. "Older than America. Older than the indigenous peoples who lived here before colonization. Some stretches follow paths that have existed for thousands of years." I knew this already. Any ranger working the AT did, but I sensed he was building to something more. "What most people don't know," he continued, "is that the trail isn't just a path through the wilderness. In certain places, at certain times, it's something else entirely." "Something else like what?" I asked. "A boundary, a seam." He paused. "A door." Before I could ask what the hell that meant, we emerged into a small clearing. At its center stood a modest cabin that, despite its remote location, appeared well-maintained. A thin spiral of smoke rose from its chimney. "This will be your post for the next month," Blackwood said. "You'll patrol a 15-mile stretch of the AT from here. Most of it is normal trail. Beautiful views, day hikers, through hikers making their way north or south depending on the season." He turned to face me, his eyes hard. "But there's a 3-mile section that requires special attention. It's why we're here. Why the special unit exists." Inside the cabin, Blackwood directed me to a worn wooden table where he unfolded a detailed map of my patrol area. He circled a section between McAfee Knob and Tinker Cliffs. "This is where the boundary thins," he said. "Especially between dusk and dawn. That's when you'll need the rules." He pointed to Mike's journal. "May I?" Reluctantly, I handed it over. Blackwood flipped through the pages until he reached the list of rules. He tapped the page with a weathered finger. These are correct but incomplete. Ranger Hollis didn't receive full orientation before. He trailed off. Let me walk you through them properly. Blackwood pulled out a crisp new Ranger logbook and began writing. His hand moved with deliberate precision as he outlined 9 rules. When he finished, he pushed the book toward me. Memorize these. Your life depends on it. I looked down at the page. Always walk the trail counterclockwise during night patrols. If you hear someone calling your name from off the trail, ignore it, even if it sounds like someone you know. Never approach or speak to hikers wearing all red. If you encounter a hiker walking backward on the trail, turn around immediately and return to the cabin. Trail markers should always appear in groups of 3. If you see a single marker or a group of 2 or 4, you've strayed onto a false trail. Retrace your steps. Carry a silver object on your person at all times. Never stay at McAfee Knob or Tinker Cliffs after sunset. If the trail appears to split into 2 identical paths, take neither. Wait 5 minutes, then proceed. If you see yourself on the trail ahead, run the other way and don't stop until you reach the cabin. What is all this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Are these some kind of procedural codes? Blackwood's expression remained impassive. No codes, no metaphors. Follow them exactly as written. He stood up. Your first patrol begins at sunrise tomorrow. I suggest you get some rest. As he reached the door, he paused. One more thing, Jenkins. Ranger Hollis was a good man, but he made a critical mistake. What was that? I asked. He thought he understood why the rules exist. You don't need to understand. You just need to follow them. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone in the cabin with a list of impossible rules and the growing certainty that I had made a terrible mistake coming here. I barely slept that night. The cabin creaked and settled in ways that sent my imagination spiraling. Twice I bolted upright, convinced I'd heard someone whisper my name from the darkened corners of the room. By the time dawn broke, painting the eastern sky in watercolor pinks and oranges, I'd convinced myself that Blackwood was playing an elaborate prank, some kind of hazing ritual for the new ranger. But as I prepared for my first patrol, a nagging voice in my head reminded me of the state they'd found Mike in. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't a joke. I methodically packed my day bag: water, trail mix, first aid kit, radio, map, compass, flashlight, and the ranger logbook with those bizarre rules. I hesitated at the last item on Blackwood's list: a silver object. The only silver thing I owned was a money clip my father had given me when I graduated college. I slipped it into my breast pocket, feeling slightly ridiculous. The morning patrol was uneventful. I hiked the first 12 miles of my assigned section, encountering nothing more threatening than a group of weekend backpackers and a pair of trail runners. The Appalachian landscape was stunning: rolling mountains blanketed in dense forest, occasional clearings offering breathtaking panoramas of the Blue Ridge Mountains stretching to the horizon. Around noon, I reached the boundary of what Blackwood had called the special section between McAfee Knob and Tinker Cliffs. Nothing visibly distinguished it from the rest of the trail. Same dirt path, same green tunnel of trees, same blue blazes marking the way. Yet something felt different. The air seemed heavier somehow, the silence deeper. Even the quality of light filtering through the canopy had subtly changed, taking on a greenish tinge like the depths of a mountain lake. I checked my watch. Plenty of time to patrol this section and get back before sunset, thus adhering to rule number 7. Taking a deep breath, I continued forward. About a half-mile in, I spotted something unusual, a trail marker painted on a birch tree. It was the standard AT white blaze, but it stood alone. According to Rule 5, markers should always appear in groups of 3. I stopped, surveying the area carefully. 20 feet ahead, I spotted 2 more blazes side by side on another tree. 3 total, but not grouped together. Did this count as a violation of Rule 5? I pulled out the logbook and reread the exact wording. Trail markers should always appear in groups of 3. If you see a single marker or a group of 2 or 4, you've strayed onto a false trail. This was 1 marker, followed by 2 more. Not quite a group of 3, but not explicitly forbidden either. After a moment's hesitation, I decided to proceed cautiously. 100 yards later, the trail began to climb steeply toward McAfee Knob, one of the most photographed spots on the entire AT. The iconic rock outcropping offered a stunning view of the Catawba Valley. As I rounded a bend, I spotted a hiker sitting on a fallen log, adjusting his bootlaces. He looked up as I approached. "Afternoon, Ranger," he said with a friendly smile. "Afternoon," I replied. "Beautiful day for hiking." "Sure is." He stood, and I noticed his attire. Red shirt, red pants, even red hiking boots. My heart skipped a beat. Rule 3. Never approach or speak to hikers wearing all red. Too late. I'd already greeted him. But maybe the rule only applied to initiating contact. The man seemed normal enough, middle-aged with a salt and pepper beard and kind eyes. "Say, I was wondering if you could point me toward the nearest water source," he asked, taking a step toward me. My filter broke, and I'm running low. I took an instinctive step back. "There's a spring about 2 miles back the way you came." I kept my response curt, fighting the instinct to be helpful. "Much obliged," he said, but made no move to leave. "You must be new. Haven't seen you on this section before." "First day," I admitted, then immediately regretted offering personal information. His smile widened slightly. "First days are important. They set the tone." He cocked his head slightly. "You finding everything normal so far?" Something about the way he emphasized normal sent a chill down my spine. "All good," I said, forcing casualness into my voice. "If you'll excuse me, I need to complete my patrol." I started walking past him, maintaining distance. As I did, he spoke again, his voice somehow different, deeper, resonant in a way that made my teeth ache. "The mountains have eyes, Ranger Jenkins. Old eyes. They're watching you now." I froze. I hadn't told him my name. When I turned back, the trail was empty. The man in red had vanished, though there was nowhere he could have gone. Steep rock face on one side, sheer drop on the other. The only sign he'd been there at all was a single red hiking sock lying on the log where he'd been sitting. I forced myself to continue the patrol, my hand occasionally patting my breast pocket to confirm the silver money clip was still there. The trail narrowed as it approached McAfee Knob, hugging the mountainside. The famous outcropping came into view, a dramatic slab of rock jutting out over the valley below. A group of hikers were taking turns posing for photos on the edge. I checked the time, 3:30 p.m. Plenty of daylight left, but I remembered Rule 7. Never stay at McAfee Knob or Tinker Cliffs after sunset. I made a mental note to leave no later than 6 o'clock to be safe. While monitoring the hikers to ensure they stayed safe, I heard someone call my name from the tree line behind me. "Jenkins! Over here!" The voice was familiar. It sounded exactly like Mike. My heart raced as I turned toward the sound. The dense undergrowth revealed nothing, but the voice came again. "Jenkins, I need your help! Quick!" Rule 2 echoed in my mind. If you hear someone calling your name from off the trail, ignore it, even if it sounds like someone you know. "Jenkins, please! I'm hurt!" Every instinct screamed at me to investigate, to help. Mike's voice sounded desperate, pained. But I remembered Blackwood's words. Follow them exactly as written. With tremendous effort, I turned away and focused on the hikers. "Did you hear that?" I asked the nearest person, a woman in her 30s with a Georgia to Maine cap. "Hear what?" she replied, looking confused. The calling continued for another 10 minutes, growing increasingly desperate, then angry, and finally fading into an inhuman wailing that made several hikers look around nervously, though none seemed to hear it as clearly as I did. By 5 p.m., the hikers had moved on, and I began making my way back toward the cabin. The forest had grown noticeably darker, shadows stretching across the trail. About a mile from McAfee Knob, I came to a spot where the path forked. 2 identical trails stretching ahead, both marked with proper groups of 3 blazes. Rule 8. If the trail appears to split into 2 identical paths, take neither. Wait 5 minutes, then proceed. I checked my watch and waited, feeling foolish but unwilling to test the consequences. As the seconds ticked by, I studied both paths. They looked perfectly identical. Same width, same curve, same pattern of rocks and roots. It was as if someone had copied and pasted a section of trail. At exactly 5 minutes, I looked up to find only one path ahead of me. The fork had vanished as if it had never existed. The rest of the hike back was mercifully uneventful, though I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed, not just by wildlife or other hikers, but by the forest itself. As the cabin came into view, I spotted Blackwood waiting on the porch, his expression unreadable. "How was your first patrol?" he asked when I approached. "Informative," I replied carefully. "I encountered some situations." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "And you're still here to talk about it. That's a good start." Inside, he had me document every unusual occurrence in a special logbook, different from my regular ranger reports. As I described the man in red and the duplicate paths, Blackwood nodded as if I was confirming what he already knew. "You did well, especially with the voice calling your name," he said when I finished. "Most new rangers fail that one the first time." "What would have happened if I'd answered?" I asked. Blackwood's eyes met mine. "Let's just say we'd be training another new ranger tomorrow." He stood to leave. "Get some rest. Night patrol starts at midnight." "Wait!" I called as he reached the door. The man in red, he knew my name. "What was he?" Blackwood paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Rule 3 doesn't say to never speak to hikers wearing all red. It says never approach or speak to hikers wearing all red. There's a reason for that specificity. Which is, those aren't hikers." He closed the door behind him, leaving me alone with more questions than answers, and the dread knowledge that I'd be back on that trail in just a few hours, when darkness ruled and, apparently, the boundary grew thinner. Sleep came in fragments, disturbed by dreams of red-clothed figures watching me from the tree line, and Mike's voice calling my name with increasing desperation. I jolted awake at 11:30 p.m., drenched in sweat despite the cabin's chill. The night patrol required additional preparation. I layered up against the mountain cold, packed extra batteries for my flashlight, and made sure my silver money clip was secure in my breast pocket. As a precaution, I also tucked a small silver pendant I found in one of the cabin drawers into my boot. better to have backup. Blackwood had left detailed instructions for the night route, a shorter 6-mile loop focusing primarily on the special section. Most importantly, I was to travel counterclockwise as specified in Rule 1. The note didn't explain why, just underlined this point 3 times. At exactly midnight, I stepped outside. The October moon hung nearly full overhead, casting the forest in silvery light and ink-black shadow. The temperature had dropped into the low 40s, my breath forming clouds that dissipated into the darkness. The usual night sounds, rustling leaves, distant owl hoots, seemed muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I began the patrol, heading southwest along the trail toward Dragon's Tooth, another popular rock formation. Unlike during the day, I saw no headlamps of night hikers or lights from distant campsites. The trail felt completely abandoned, yet anything but empty. An hour in, I reached a small clearing where the trees opened up to reveal the star-filled sky. As I paused to check my map, I noticed something odd about the stars directly overhead. They seemed to be moving. Not the usual gentle drift of celestial bodies, but purposeful movements, like fireflies forming patterns. I watched, transfixed, as they arranged themselves into what looked like letters, then words, "Go back, Jenkins." I blinked hard, convinced my tired mind was playing tricks. When I looked again, the stars had returned to their normal random scatter. Had I imagined it? Maybe lack of sleep was affecting me more than I thought. I continued forward, hyper alert to every sound and movement. The trail descended into a valley where the moonlight couldn't penetrate, forcing me to rely on my flashlight. Its beam seemed weaker than it should be, struggling to cut through darkness that felt almost solid. That's when I heard it. Footsteps on the trail behind me. Heavy, deliberate steps crunching on fallen leaves. I stopped and turned, sweeping my light across the path. Nothing. The moment I resumed walking, the footsteps continued, perfectly matching my pace, but always remaining the same distance behind me. I stopped again. The footsteps stopped. I took 3 quick steps. 3 quick steps echoed behind me. Rule 1 echoed in my mind. Always walk the trail counterclockwise during night patrols. Was this why? To ensure whatever was behind me stayed behind me? The footsteps continued for nearly a mile before finally fading. By then, I was approaching the 3-mile special section that Blackwood had warned me about, the stretch between McAfee Knob and Tinker Cliffs. The moment I crossed into this section, the atmosphere changed perceptibly. The air grew dense and seemed to vibrate slightly, creating a subtle pressure in my ears, like the feeling just before a thunderstorm breaks. My flashlight dimmed further until it illuminated barely 5 feet ahead. "Park Service," I called out, my voice sounding flat and muffled. "Ranger Jenkins on patrol." An answering whisper came from everywhere and nowhere. "Jenkins! Jenkins!" The forest seemed to be passing my name back and forth, the sound growing distorted with each repetition until it was unrecognizable, just sibilant hisses that raised the hair on my arms. I quickened my pace, focusing on the trail markers. 3 per group, just as the rules specified. I counted each set obsessively, using the task to keep panic at bay. The trail climbed steadily toward Tinker Cliffs. According to my map, I'd reach the base of the cliffs in about a half mile, then loop around without ascending to the top, in accordance with Rule 7. Never stay at McAfee Knob or Tinker Cliffs after sunset. As I rounded a bend, my flashlight beam caught movement ahead. A lone figure stood in the middle of the path about 20 yards away. The light wasn't strong enough to make out details, but I could see the person was facing away from me, standing unnaturally still. "Hello?" I called, my hand instinctively moving to the pepper spray on my belt. This area is closed for hiking after dark. No response, no movement. I took a cautious step forward, and the figure began to walk, backwards toward me, feet sliding smoothly over the uneven ground without stumbling. Rule 4 slammed into my consciousness. If you encounter a hiker walking backward on the trail, turn around immediately and return to the cabin. Without hesitation, I spun on my heel and began walking rapidly in the opposite direction. The rules didn't say to run, and somehow I sensed that running would be a mistake. Instead, I maintained a brisk pace, resisting the overwhelming urge to look back. I could hear it following, not the matching footsteps from before, but a sound like something heavy being dragged. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause, coming steadily closer. Just focus on the trail, I told myself. Follow Rule 1, continue counterclockwise. Don't look back. The dragging sound grew louder, close enough now that I could feel a cold draft on the back of my neck with each scrape. My fingers closed around the silver money clip in my pocket, drawing strange comfort from its solid presence. Suddenly, the trail markers ahead changed. Instead of groups of 3, I now saw sets of 4 blazes on each tree. According to Rule 5, I'd strayed onto a false trail. But that was impossible. I'd been following the correct path, hadn't taken any turns. How could the trail itself have changed? The dragging sound behind me grew louder still. I had seconds at most before whatever was following would reach me. Rule 5. If you see a single marker or a group of 2 or 4, you've strayed onto a false trail. Retrace your steps. But retracing my steps would mean walking directly toward the backward walking figure, breaking Rule 4. Trapped between contradicting rules, I made a split-second decision. I pulled out the silver money clip and pendant, one in each hand, and stepped off the trail into the dense underbrush. Not forward or backward, but sideways, creating a third option where the rules gave me none. I pushed through mountain laurel and rhododendron, creating as direct a route as possible toward where I believed the main trail continued. Branches clawed at my face and clothing. The forest seemed to actively resist my progress, thickets becoming denser the harder I pushed. Behind me, the dragging sound had stopped. Instead, I heard a high, thin keening, like wind through a narrow crack, but with disturbing undertones that sounded almost like language. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I broke through to what appeared to be the main trail again. Checking the blazes, I confirmed they were in proper groups of 3. I'd managed to bypass the false trail section. Relief was short-lived. As I turned to continue counterclockwise, I spotted a figure ahead on the trail. The moonlight revealed enough detail to freeze my blood. It was me. Same uniform, same build, same gear. Even at a distance, there was no mistaking my own silhouette. Rule 9. If you see yourself on the trail ahead, run the other way and don't stop until you reach the cabin. This time, running was explicitly prescribed, and I didn't hesitate. I turned and sprinted back the way I'd come, no longer caring about what might be following. Pure survival instinct took over. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to buckle. The trail became a blur of moonlight and shadow. Behind me, I heard my doppelganger giving chase, its footfalls matching mine exactly but slightly out of sync, creating an eerie echo effect. I don't know how long I ran or how far. The night and forest became a surreal nightmare landscape where distance and time lost meaning. At some point, I realized the footsteps behind me had stopped. Still, I didn't slow until the cabin's outline appeared ahead, its single window glowing with warm light. I burst through the door, slamming it shut and dropping the security bar into place. Only then did I collapse into a chair, gasping for breath, heart hammering against my ribs. Blackwood sat calmly at the table, a cup of steaming coffee in his hands. He showed no surprise at my dramatic entrance. "You saw your double?" he said. Not a question. I nodded, still too winded to speak. He pushed a mug of coffee toward me. "Drink. It helps." The coffee was black and bitter, but it steadied my hands. After a few sips, I found my voice. "What the hell was that thing?" "We call it a walker," Blackwood replied. "It's not actually you, just wearing your form, like a suit." "Why?" "To replace you." I stared at him. "Replace me? You mean, if it catches you, it takes your place, returns to the cabin in your body while you..." He trailed off. "Well, you're not you anymore." The implication hit me like a physical blow. Is that what happened to Mike? He saw his double but didn't run? Blackwood's expression softened slightly. Hollis knew the rules, followed them for years. But he got curious, started testing boundaries. He sighed. The last night anyone saw him alive, he told another ranger he was going to try to communicate with his walker. Said he had a theory that they weren't dangerous if you approached them correctly. I thought of the note found with Mike's remains. He didn't follow the rules. "The rules aren't arbitrary," Blackwood continued. "They're like immune responses. The trail, the real trail, the ancient one that existed before the AT was even marked, it's alive in its way. And in certain places, it's thin." Thin? Like a membrane between our world and somewhere else. The thin places shift and change, but they've always been strongest in these mountains. The Cherokee knew it. The early settlers, too. He took a sip of his coffee. "Our job isn't just trail maintenance or helping lost hikers. We're wardens of the boundary. The rules keep us safe while we do that work." I rubbed my face, exhaustion and fear creating a dangerous cocktail in my system. "So this walker, it's still out there, wearing my face?" "For now," Blackwood nodded. "But it can't maintain the form for long without making contact with you. By sunrise, it'll shed your appearance. And if I encounter it again, same rule applies. Run the other way. Don't stop until you reach safety." He stood up. "You did well tonight, Jenkins. Many first-timers don't make it back from their initial night patrol." As he reached the door, a thought struck me. Blackwood. If the walkers take people's forms to replace them, and we're supposed to run from them... I hesitated, almost afraid to voice the question. "How do I know you're really Blackwood?" The older ranger smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him. "Good question. You're learning." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small silver object, a badge with strange markings I didn't recognize. Silver repels them. They can't touch it or carry it. That's why Rule 6 exists. He placed the badge on the table between us. "Get some rest. You're off patrol until tomorrow afternoon." As the door closed behind him, I stared at the silver badge, then at my own hands, still clutching the money clip and pendant. The rules were real. The danger was real. And somehow, I'd survived my first night on the trail. But Mike's voice still echoed in my memory. "If all goes well, I'll bring you on board too." What exactly had he discovered that made him break the rules? And why did I have the sinking feeling that I was still missing crucial information about this assignment? I slept fitfully until mid-morning, haunted by dreams of my doppelganger chasing me through endless forest corridors. When I finally gave up on sleep around 11 a.m., I found a note from Blackwood slipped under my door. Supply run to Damascus. Back by 4. Stay in the cabin until I return. Surprisingly, there was no mention of last night's events. The casual tone of the note felt jarring after what I'd experienced, as if narrowly escaping a supernatural entity wearing my face was just another day at the office for Appalachian Trail Rangers. Maybe it was. With several hours alone, I decided to search the cabin for information about Mike. Blackwood had been forthcoming about some things, but evasive about others. If I wanted the full story, I needed to dig deeper. The cabin's main room contained little beyond basic furniture: a table, chairs, a small wood stove, and shelves stocked with supplies. A narrow hallway led to 2 small bedrooms and a basic bathroom. My search of the common areas yielded nothing unusual. In my assigned bedroom, I checked under the mattress, inside the nightstand, and along the floorboards for loose panels. Nothing. Blackwood's room was locked. I was about to give up when I noticed something odd about the cabin's dimensions. The exterior suggested more space than the interior rooms accounted for. Standing in the hallway, I tapped the walls, listening for hollow spots. Near the bathroom, a section sounded different. Careful examination revealed a seam in the wood paneling. It took 15 minutes of prodding and pressing before I found the release mechanism. A knothole that, when pushed in the right direction, caused a section of wall to pop slightly ajar. Behind it lay a small, windowless room that appeared to serve as both office and archive. A desk held an old computer, while floor-to-ceiling shelves contained dozens of logbooks similar to the one I was using. A large map of the Appalachian Trail dominated one wall, sections highlighted in different colors, with annotations I couldn't decipher from a distance. I went straight to the logbooks, scanning dates until I found entries from the weeks leading up to Mike's death. His handwriting filled several volumes, the most recent containing patrol reports similar to mine, but spanning 3 years. The entries were mostly routine until about 2 months before his death. Then the tone changed. August 23rd, encountered unusual marker configuration near Dragon's Tooth. Single white blaze followed by group of 5. Rule violation, but path appeared normal. Investigated cautiously. No anomalies detected. Reported to Blackwood, who ordered section closed for maintenance. Need to follow up. August 29th. Second walker sighting this week. This one didn't take my form but appeared as a child. Rule 3 doesn't specify children. Need clarification. September 5th. Found cairn arrangement at Tinker Cliffs that doesn't match any on record. 7 stones in spiral pattern. Native American. Took photos for research. September 12th. Blackwood denied access to historical records. Says some knowledge is restricted to Level 3 clearance. Current status, Level 1. Frustrating. The pattern is there if they just let me see it. I flipped through more entries, watching Mike's professional tone give way to increasing frustration and obsession with understanding the trail's mysteries. The final entry, dated 3 days before his death, sent a chill through me. September 27th. Breakthrough. The rules are a code. They're not meant to be followed blindly. They're a language for communicating with the walkers. Silver isn't a repellent. It's a conductor. Going to test my theory tonight at McAfee Knob. If I'm right, everything changes. That was it. The next page was blank. I set down the logbook, my mind racing. Mike had believed the rules were something other than protective measures, a code or language, and he'd deliberately broken Rule 7 by staying at McAfee Knob after sunset to test his theory. Whatever he'd encountered there had torn him apart. On the wall map, I located the exact spot where Mike's remains had been found. It wasn't on the main trail, but in a small valley about a quarter-mile from McAfee Knob. I memorized the location, determined to visit it during my afternoon patrol. Before leaving the hidden room, I noticed a folder on the desk labeled Incident Reports. Inside were summaries of ranger disappearances and deaths dating back to the 1950s. Each file contained a clinical description of what was found, followed by a classification code. Mike's file was marked CL-3, Boundary Violation, Walker Encounter. Other classifications included RL1, Rule Violation, Voice Response, TM2, Temporal Manipulation Event, and most disturbingly, RS4, Replacement Successful. That last one sent ice through my veins. Replacement Successful. Walkers that had successfully taken over someone's identity. Were some of these rangers actually imposters? A car engine outside alerted me to Blackwood's return. I hastily replaced the files, sealed the hidden room, and tried to look casual when he entered carrying supplies. "Productive morning?" he asked, eyeing me suspiciously. "Just resting," I lied, still processing last night. He nodded slowly. "First Walker encounter is always rough. You handled it well." I helped unpack the supplies, waiting for the right moment to ask the question burning in my mind. Finally, as Blackwood prepared for his own patrol, I took the chance. "I've been thinking about Mike," I said carefully. "About what you said, that he tried to communicate with his walker." Blackwood paused, expression darkening. "What about it? Was there any, logic to his theory? Any evidence it might work?" The older ranger's eyes narrowed. "Hollis was a good man, excellent ranger, but he fell into the same trap that claims many who patrol the boundary. He started looking for patterns that aren't there." "So there's no truth to the idea that the rules are some kind of code?" The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Blackwood's face hardened, and he set down the pack he'd been organizing. "You've been reading his logbooks." Not a question. I didn't bother denying it. "I want to understand what happened to him." "What happened is exactly what I told you. He broke the rules." Blackwood's voice was ice. "The rules aren't arbitrary, Jenkins. They're not symbolic. They're survival mechanisms refined through generations of blood and loss." He stepped closer, his intensity unnerving. "Every single one was written because someone died learning it was necessary. They're not meant to be interpreted or decoded. They're meant to be followed. But what if—" "There are no what-ifs on the boundary," he cut me off. "There's what works and what gets you killed. Or worse." "Worse than killed?" Blackwood's expression shifted subtly. "You read the incident reports too, didn't you? The classifications?" I nodded. "Then you saw RS4 cases." He sighed. "Replacement successful. When a walker takes someone's place permanently." A chill ran down my spine. "How do you know it's happened?" "Little inconsistencies at first. Memory gaps, behavior changes. But the biggest tell is their relationship with silver." He tapped his own pocket where I knew he kept his silver badge. "They can mimic the form perfectly, but they can't touch silver without revealing themselves." He studied me for a long moment. "That's why we all carry it, why we all test each other occasionally. Management likes to call it ongoing verification protocol, but old-timers just call it the silver test. I thought of the money clip in my pocket. Had Blackwood been testing me all along? "Your afternoon patrol starts in an hour," he said, changing the subject. "Standard route. Be back before sunset." "What about night patrol?" "Not tonight. I'll handle it." He paused at the door. "And Jenkins?" "Stay on the marked trail this time. No detours to where they found Hollis." As the door closed behind him, I realized two things. First, Blackwood somehow knew exactly what I'd been planning. And second, his warning had only strengthened my resolve to visit the site of Mike's death. Whatever had happened to Mike, whatever he'd discovered that made him break the rules, I needed to see it for myself, even if it meant breaking a few rules of my own. I checked my watch. 1 hour until patrol. Just enough time to prepare, and to make sure my silver money clip was securely in my pocket. Because one thing was becoming increasingly clear. In this job, the only person you could truly trust was yourself. And sometimes, not even that. I left for my afternoon patrol with 2 objectives: complete my assigned route and investigate the site where Mike had died. The autumn day had turned moody, with low clouds skimming the ridgelines and a brisk wind sending leaves spiraling down from the canopy. The regular portion of my patrol passed without incident, just normal hikers enjoying the trail, unaware of what lurked in its special sections. I made friendly conversation, checked permits, and provided trail information as any ranger would. All the while, I was planning my detour. According to the map I'd studied, reaching the location where they found Mike's remains would require going off-trail about a 1/4 mile east of McAfee Knob. The official report said he'd been found in a small valley with unusual rock formations, a place not marked on standard trail maps. As I approached McAfee Knob, I kept a vigilant eye out for any signs of Blackwood. He hadn't specified where he'd be patrolling, but I suspected he was watching me more closely after our conversation. The last thing I needed was for him to catch me deliberately visiting the one place he'd warned me to avoid. McAfee Knob was busy with hikers as usual, groups taking turns posing for photos on the famous outcropping. I performed my ranger duties, keeping everyone a safe distance from the edge, while scanning the surroundings. No sign of Blackwood or anything supernatural, just stunning views of the Catawba Valley below, now shrouded in patches of mist that gave the landscape an otherworldly quality. By 3:30 p.m., the crowd had thinned as hikers headed back to complete their day trips before dark. I checked my watch, about 2 hours until sunset. Enough time to visit the site and return to the trail before breaking Rule 7. When the last hikers were out of sight, I slipped into the dense forest east of the knob. No path led the way. I navigated using my compass and the mental map I'd memorized. The terrain quickly grew challenging, steep slopes covered in loose shale, thickets of mountain laurel forming nearly impenetrable walls, fallen trees creating obstacles that had to be climbed over or crawled under. The forest felt different here. Older, wilder. The usual trail sounds of distant hikers and birdsong faded, replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by my own labored breathing and the occasional snap of branches beneath my feet. After 20 minutes of difficult hiking, I reached a ridgeline that offered a view of the small valley below. What I saw made me pause. The valley wasn't a natural formation. It was almost perfectly circular, as if someone had pressed a giant cookie cutter into the mountain. At its center stood a cluster of standing stones arranged in a pattern that was clearly deliberate. I pulled out my binoculars for a better look. 7 stones of varying heights formed a rough circle, with an 8th, larger stone in the center. They were weathered and covered in lichen, suggesting great age. But something about their placement felt wrong, too precise, too intentional for a natural arrangement. This had to be the cairn arrangement Mike had mentioned in his logbook entry, the one he'd photographed and researched. I made my way down the steep slope into the valley, fighting the growing sense that I was making a terrible mistake. Near the bottom, I found the first evidence of what had happened to Mike. Tattered scraps of a Forest Service uniform caught on thorn bushes, stained dark with what could only be dried blood. The temperature seemed to drop as I approached the stone circle. Despite the afternoon hour, the valley was already in deep shadow, the surrounding ridges blocking the sun. I pulled out my flashlight, unwilling to be caught here in darkness. At the edge of the circle, I hesitated. Every ranger instinct screamed at me to turn back, to follow the rules that had kept me alive so far. But I needed to understand what Mike had discovered. "For you, Mike," I whispered, and stepped inside. Nothing happened. No supernatural event. No walker appearance. Just stones and silence. Up close, I could see that each stone was covered in faint carvings, most worn away by centuries of weather. What remained looked like a mix of symbols, some resembling Native American petroglyphs, others unnervingly like the strange markings I'd seen on Blackwood's silver badge. I circled the arrangement slowly, photographing each stone with my phone. As I moved, I noticed something odd. The stones seemed to shift slightly in my peripheral vision, as if adjusting their positions when I wasn't looking directly at them. In the center of the circle, where the largest stone stood, the ground was discolored. Dark stains soaked deep into the soil. Mike's blood. This was where he had died, where whatever he'd summoned or encountered had torn him apart. I knelt to examine the area more closely and noticed something half buried in the dirt. A small silver object gleaming dully in my flashlight beam. Carefully, I brushed away the soil to reveal a silver pocket watch. The case was engraved with the Forest Service emblem, and below it, the initials M.H., Mike Hollis. When I picked it up, the watch was ice cold despite the warm soil it had been buried in. As I held it, the temperature seemed to drop further, my breath suddenly visible in front of me. The watch began to vibrate in my palm, subtle at first, then with increasing intensity. I should have dropped it immediately, but curiosity overrode caution. I pried open the case. Inside wasn't a clock face, but a small mirror. And in that mirror, I didn't see my own reflection. I saw Mike. Not the Mike I had known. Strong, confident, always smiling. This Mike had hollow eyes and skin stretched too tight across his bones. When he spoke, his voice emerged from the watch in a dry whisper that somehow carried perfectly in the silent valley. "Jenkins, you came." I nearly dropped the watch in shock. "Mike? How?" "Not much time," he interrupted, his image flickering. "They'll know you're here soon." "Who? The walkers?" "Blackwood. The others. They're not what they seem." His voice grew urgent. "The rules aren't protection. They're containment." "Containment?" "I don't understand." "Not keeping things out." Mike's image wavered like a bad transmission. "Keeping something in. All of us. This place isn't what we think." A low rumble of thunder sounded from the darkening sky. The wind picked up suddenly, sending leaves swirling around the stone circle. "The rules are a lock," Mike continued. "I found the key, in the watch, the patterns." His image stuttered, breaking apart like a bad video signal. "Mike, what patterns? What are you trying to tell me?" "Seventh rule is the anchor, Break it at the right moment and you can... Static interrupted his words. When his face reappeared, it was contorted in pain. Don't trust Blackwood. He's been replaced. Years ago. You need to... The watch suddenly burned cold in my hand, so intense it felt like fire. I cried out but managed to hold on. They're coming. Mike's voice became desperate. Get to Tinker Cliffs at sunset. Tomorrow. Bring Silver. Bring the watch. I'll show you... His image vanished, replaced by a swirling darkness that seemed to leak out from the mirror, curling around my fingers like black smoke. The watch slammed shut on its own, nearly catching my fingers. The sudden silence was broken by a sound from the forest edge, a branch snapping. I wasn't alone. I pocketed the watch and spun around. At the rim of the valley stood a figure in a Forest Service uniform. Even at a distance, I recognized Blackwood's posture. He wasn't moving, just watching me from the tree line. I had two choices: confront him or flee. Mike's warning echoed in my mind. Don't trust Blackwood. He's been replaced. If true, the man watching me wasn't Blackwood at all, but a walker who had taken his place, perhaps years ago, according to Mike. An entity that had been monitoring new rangers, enforcing the rules not for protection, but for containment. I chose a third option. Just checking the area, sir, I called out with forced casualness. Heard reports of unusual activity from hikers. Blackwood remained motionless for several seconds, then raised his hand in acknowledgement. Anything to report? His voice carried clearly across the valley, unchanged from our earlier conversation. Nothing significant, I lied, feeling Mike's watch like a burning coal in my pocket. Heading back to the trail now. I began climbing the slope toward him, taking the most direct route out of the valley. Each step felt like walking into a trap, but showing fear would only confirm his suspicions. As I approached, Blackwood's expression remained neutral, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. You shouldn't be off trail in this area, Jenkins, especially not there. He nodded toward the stone circle below. Sorry, sir. Won't happen again. What's that in your pocket? He asked suddenly, eyes fixed on the bulge where I'd stashed the watch. My mind raced. If Blackwood was truly a walker, he couldn't touch Silver, but the watch had been buried in the ground for months. If it still had protective properties, why hadn't the walker that killed Mike been affected by it? Unless Mike hadn't been killed by a walker at all. Just my GPS unit. I patted my pocket without removing the watch. Battery died. That's why I was a bit turned around. Blackwood studied me for a long moment. We should head back. Storm coming in. He gestured to the darkening sky. Together, we hiked back to the main trail in uncomfortable silence. I could feel his eyes on me, searching for any sign that would reveal what I'd found. I focused on keeping my breathing steady and my expression neutral. When we reached McAfee Knob, the last hikers were hurrying off the mountain as thunder rumbled closer. The air had taken on the electric quality that precedes a major storm, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. I'll finish the patrol, Blackwood said. You head back to the cabin. We'll talk more tonight. The way he said it, we'll talk more tonight, sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the weather. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, possibly a threat. Yes, sir, I replied, playing the obedient ranger. As I started down the trail, Blackwood called after me. Jenkins. I turned back. Sir? Remember Rule 6. He tapped his breast pocket where he kept his silver badge. Always carry silver. Storms like this, they stir things up on the boundary. I nodded and continued down the trail, hyper aware of his gaze following me until I rounded a bend and disappeared from view. Only then did I allow myself to breathe normally, my hand closing around Mike's watch in my pocket. The storm broke just as the cabin came into view. Lightning split the sky, and rain began to fall in sheets. I sprinted the final distance, soaked to the skin by the time I reached the porch. Inside, I dried off and changed clothes, then carefully examined the watch I'd found. In the cabin's light, I could see more details, small symbols engraved around the rim of the case, matching some I'd seen on the standing stones. The mirror inside was unlike any I'd seen in a normal pocket watch, with a depth that seemed impossible given the watch's size. Mike's words echoed in my mind. The 7th rule is the anchor. Rule 7. Never stay at McAfee Knob or Tinker Cliffs after sunset. He wanted me to break that rule, to be at Tinker Cliffs at sunset tomorrow with the watch, to see whatever he had discovered. The rain hammered on the cabin roof as I sat contemplating this impossible choice. Follow the rules that had kept me alive so far, or trust the ghostly image of my dead mentor who claimed those very rules were a form of imprisonment. Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the cabin in harsh white light. In that instant, I caught sight of something outside the window, a face pressed against the glass, watching me. My face. But in the next flash, it was gone. The walker was still hunting me. And tomorrow, I would have to decide which posed the greater danger, the entity trying to replace me, or the rules I'd been told would protect me from it. Blackwood didn't return until well after midnight. I feigned sleep when I heard his footsteps on the porch, then listened as he moved around the cabin. Twice he paused outside my bedroom door. I could see his shadow in the crack beneath it, but he didn't enter. I kept Mike's watch clutched in my hand beneath the pillow, drawing strange comfort from its cold metal surface. Sleep eventually came in restless bursts, filled with dreams of walking backwards through endless forest corridors while searching for my own reflection. Morning arrived gray and subdued, the storm having passed but leaving a persistent mist that clung to the mountains. Blackwood was already gone when I emerged, but a note awaited me on the table. Supply run to Roanoke. Back late. Complete standard day patrol. No night patrol scheduled. The words, "No night patrol," were underlined 3 times. The message seemed clear. Stay away from Tinker Cliffs at sunset. I made coffee and sat contemplating my options. Mike's words rattled in my head. Don't trust Blackwood. He's been replaced. If true, then Blackwood's emphatic instruction was suspect. But if Mike was wrong, or if the entity in the watch wasn't Mike at all, then breaking Rule 7 could be a fatal mistake. The watch sat on the table before me, innocuous, except for the unnatural chill it radiated. I opened it again, hoping for another message, but the mirror inside showed only my own tired reflection. My patrol that day was mechanical. I went through the motions while my mind worked through scenarios. By mid-afternoon, I'd made my decision. I would go to Tinker Cliffs at sunset, but I'd prepare for every contingency. Back at the cabin, I gathered supplies, extra flashlights, batteries, emergency flares, first aid kit, water, protein bars, and most importantly, every silver item I could find. Besides my money clip and the watch, I discovered a silver letter opener in the desk drawer, a tarnished silver spoon in the kitchen, and a thin silver chain abandoned in the bathroom. I distributed these items throughout my clothing, pockets, boot, inside my hat, creating a sort of silver armor. As an additional precaution, I wrote down everything I'd learned so far, sealed it in an envelope addressed to Forest Service headquarters, and hid it under a loose floorboard I'd discovered in my bedroom. If I didn't return, maybe someone would find it. I departed at 4:30 p.m., giving myself ample time to reach Tinker Cliffs before the 6:43 p.m. sunset. The forest felt watchful as I hiked, shadows deepening between the trees, despite hours of daylight remaining. Twice I paused, certain I heard footsteps paralleling my path, but saw nothing when I investigated. The trail to Tinker Cliffs wound steadily upward, traversing rocky terrain before emerging onto the dramatic limestone outcroppings that gave the area its name. Unlike McAfee Knob's single dramatic overlook, Tinker Cliffs offered a series of jagged rock formations stretching along the ridgeline for nearly half a mile. I arrived with an hour to spare before sunset. The cliffs were deserted, unusual for such a popular spot, but perhaps the lingering bad weather had discouraged hikers. Mist swirled through the valleys below, occasionally parting to reveal the patchwork of forests and fields stretching to the horizon. I chose a position that offered both the panoramic view and a quick escape route back to the trail if needed. With my back against a large boulder, I could monitor the approach from either direction. Then I waited, Mike's watch in one hand, my flashlight in the other. The sun began its final descent, painting the mist in shades of gold and amber. As it touched the distant ridgeline, I opened the watch, unsure what to expect. Nothing happened. Minutes passed. The sun sank lower, its bottom edge now merging with the mountains. My heart raced with anticipation and fear. Still nothing. Had I misunderstood? Was this all an elaborate trap? Or was Mike's entity waiting for the exact moment of sunset? The sun's upper rim hovered just above the horizon when I heard it. Footsteps on the rocky path. I turned, expecting Blackwood, but the trail remained empty. The sound came again, closer, yet I saw nothing. Then a shimmer in the air, like heat rising from hot pavement. The shimmer coalesced, forming a translucent outline that gradually solidified into Mike's form. He looked more substantial than he had in the watch's mirror, though still not fully corporeal. I could see the landscape through him, as if he were made of dense fog. "You came," he said, his voice echoing strangely. "I wasn't sure you would." I held up the watch. "What is this, Mike? What happened to you?" "It's complicated." His form flickered as a gust of wind passed through it. "We don't have much time." "Are you dead?" A sad smile crossed his spectral face. "Yes and no. My body is gone, but I'm trapped. Between states. Between places. The walker that attacked you—" "There was no walker," he interrupted. "That's the lie they tell to keep us following the rules." My confusion must have shown on my face. Mike's ghost, or whatever it was, moved closer, his form becoming more defined as the sun slipped further behind the mountains. The Appalachian Trail isn't just a trail, Jenkins. In certain places, it's a boundary between worlds, but not in the way Blackwood told you. What do you mean? This world, our Earth, it's like a prison, a containment zone, and we're not the prisoners. His image flickered again. "We're the wardens." I struggled to understand. "Wardens? Of what?" "Something ancient. Something that was here long before humans." Mike gestured to the vast landscape below. "The Native Americans knew. The early settlers, too. They built the original trails as boundaries to keep it contained. The Appalachian Trail was formalized over those ancient paths." "What is it?" I asked, dreading the answer. "They don't have a name in our language. The Cherokee called them Nunahi, the Immortals. European settlers called them fair folk or the hidden people. Mike's expression darkened. But those are just comfortable names for something far older and more alien. The sun disappeared completely, leaving only a golden afterglow on the horizon. As darkness crept over the cliffs, Mike's form grew more solid, more present. The rules aren't protection from walkers, he continued. There are no walkers, only reflections, echoes of ourselves trying to communicate from the other side. The other side of what? The boundary. Mike pointed to where I'd seen my doppelganger. When you see yourself on the trail, that's not something trying to replace you. It's a version of you that crossed over, trying to warn you. My head spun with this revelation. But the backward-walking figures? The hikers in red? Manifestations of the boundary thinning. Signs we're taught to fear to keep us from investigating. His voice took on an urgent quality. The silver doesn't repel anything. It conducts. It's a key to crossing safely. Crossing? Crossing to where? The real world. Mike's ghost looked at me intently. This place, this entire reality, is the containment zone. We're inside the prison, not guarding it from outside. The watch in my hand grew colder, the chill spreading up my arm. Behind Mike, I noticed the darkening landscape beginning to shift. Outlines blurred. Distances seemed to contract and expand. The stars emerging overhead arranged themselves in configurations I'd never seen in any night sky. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Break the 7th rule, which you're doing now, while holding silver at the boundary. It creates a temporary door." He gestured to the watch. "That's not just silver. It's a focal point I created, tuned to this specific location. A door to where? Freedom. Reality." His form rippled like a reflection in disturbed water. I managed to partially cross before Blackwood caught me. He destroyed my body, but the watch preserved part of me. Enough to try again with help. "Blackwood killed you?" Horror washed through me. "Blackwood isn't human. Hasn't been for decades. He's one of their guardians, created to keep us inside, to enforce the rules, to maintain the prison." Mike's ghost moved closer still. "Why do you think the Forest Service has special units patrolling these boundaries? Why the secrecy? They're not protecting hikers from supernatural dangers. They're maintaining the walls of our reality." The watch vibrated in my palm, its cold now almost unbearable. Around us, the air seemed to thicken and distort. The trail behind me, my escape route, twisted in my vision, seeming miles away one moment and inches the next. "It's starting," Mike said. "The door is opening. We need to cross together." He extended a translucent hand toward me. "Trust me, Jenkins, like you always did." I hesitated, doubt suddenly flooding my mind. This went against everything I'd been taught, everything that had kept me alive so far. What if this wasn't really Mike? What if the rules truly were protection? "If you stay," his ghost continued, "you'll keep patrolling a false trail, enforcing rules designed to keep humanity ignorant and contained. Or worse, Blackwood knows you've been asking questions. You'll end up like me, or replaced by one of their constructs." The landscape continued its surreal transformation. Trees bent at impossible angles. The cliffs beneath my feet seemed to breathe. In the valley below, lights appeared. Not the expected twinkle of distant towns, but strange, flowing patterns that moved with deliberate purpose. "Choose now," Mike urged. "The door won't stay open long." The rational part of my mind screamed that this was madness, that I should run back to the cabin and forget everything I'd seen. But another part, the part that had always trusted Mike, that had sensed something fundamentally wrong about this assignment from the beginning, pushed me forward. I took a step toward Mike's outstretched hand. A shout from behind froze me in place. "Jenkins, stop!" Blackwood emerged from the distorted trail, moving with unnatural speed. But something was wrong with his appearance. In the deepening twilight, his outline seemed to waver and shift, his proportions subtly wrong. As he drew closer, I could see that his eyes reflected light like an animal's. "He's lying to you," Blackwood called, slowing his approach. "That's not Hollis. It's using his form, his memories." Mike's ghost grew agitated. "There's no time. He'll close the door." "The watch, Jenkins," Blackwood said, edging closer. "Put it down. It's not what you think." I looked between them. The ghost of my mentor and the increasingly inhuman form of my supervisor. Both claimed the other was lying. Both wanted me to trust them with my life. And I had seconds to decide. "The rules exist for a reason," Blackwood insisted, his voice distorting slightly as he spoke. "Not to imprison, but to prevent something worse than death." "Don't listen," Mike's ghost reached for me. "This is your only chance." The watch in my hand grew impossibly cold, frost forming on my fingers. The world around us continued its grotesque transformation, reality itself seeming to peel away like old wallpaper, revealing something alien beneath. In that moment of ultimate decision, a memory surfaced. Something Mike had told me during my first week as a ranger. When you're lost in the wilderness, trust your instincts, but verify with your tools. Your gut might save your life, but only if your compass confirms it. I looked down at the watch. The key to whatever door was opening around us. Then at the silver money clip in my other hand. My protection according to the rules. And I made my choice. In one fluid motion, I hurled the watch over the cliff's edge. Time seemed to slow as it tumbled through the air, silver case glinting in the last rays of twilight. Mike's ghost lunged for it with a howl of rage that sounded nothing like my mentor's voice. Blackwood surged forward, his body moving with impossible speed. The moment the watch disappeared into the mist below, the distortion in the landscape intensified. The very air cracked like glass, fracture lines spreading outward from where I stood. Mike's form shattered into fragments, each piece reflecting a different version of him, some human, some decidedly not. "Run!" Blackwood shouted, his voice resonating with power I hadn't heard before. "Back to the trail!" I turned and sprinted for the path, the world dissolving around me. The solid rock beneath my feet rippled like water. Trees bent toward me with grasping branch fingers. The sky overhead swirled with colors that had no names in human language. Behind me, the fragments of Mike coalesced into something new, a towering figure of smoke and angles, with too many limbs arranged in impossible configurations. It spoke with a voice that scraped against my brain like rusted metal. "Fool! The door was opening!" Blackwood positioned himself between me and the entity, his body transforming as well. His Forest Service uniform fell away, revealing a form composed of silver light and ancient symbols that hurt my eyes to look at directly. In his hand appeared a spear of pure radiance. "Get back to the cabin," he commanded. "Follow the rules. Don't stop for anything." I didn't need to be told twice. As the two beings clashed in a battle that bent reality around them, I ran headlong down the trail, the silver money clip burning hot in my pocket. The forest had become a nightmare landscape, Trail markers appeared and vanished randomly. Rocks shifted position when I wasn't looking directly at them. Faces formed in the bark of trees, watching my panicked flight with hollow eyes. Something was following me. I could hear multiple sets of footsteps in perfect synchronization with my own. I didn't look back, remembering Rule 9. Whatever pursued me was using my own form, my own movements. If I saw it, I'd be lost. The trail split into multiple identical paths ahead of me. I skidded to a halt, breathing hard, trying to remember Rule 8. If the trail appears to split into two identical paths, take neither. Wait 5 minutes, then proceed. I had nowhere near 5 minutes. The footsteps were gaining, and the forest around me was unraveling like a poorly knitted sweater, revealing glimpses of something vast and incomprehensible beyond. A voice that was my own but not my own echoed from behind. "We can show you the truth." I clutched the silver money clip so hard it cut into my palm, drawing blood. The pain cleared my head enough to remember Blackwood's words from my first day. The rules aren't arbitrary, Jenkins. They're survival mechanisms refined through generations of blood and loss. I counted slowly to 5, focusing on the physical sensation of the silver against my skin, the solid ground beneath my feet. On the count of 5, I looked up to find a single path before me once again. Without hesitation, I continued running. The moon rose overhead, impossibly large and tinged with red. Its light painted the forest in crimson shadows. I was still miles from the cabin, and the boundary between worlds was growing thinner by the second. A figure stepped out onto the trail ahead, a child in a red coat, standing unnaturally still. Rule 3 echoed in my mind. Never approach or speak to hikers wearing all red. I veered off the trail, crashing through underbrush to give the figure a wide berth before rejoining the path further down. As I passed, the child's head rotated 180 degrees to follow my movement, its face a blank canvas with shallow indentations where features should be. Back on the trail, I pushed forward despite burning lungs and trembling legs. The rules had kept me alive so far, and I clung to them like a drowning man to driftwood. Rule 1. Always walk the trail counterclockwise during night patrols. I was heading back toward the cabin. Was that counterclockwise from where I'd started? I couldn't be sure anymore. The landmarks had shifted, the very geography of the mountain seeming to rearrange itself. A familiar voice called from off to my right. "Jenkins! Help me! I'm hurt!" It was Blackwood's voice, but I remembered Rule 2 and pressed on without responding. The trail markers appeared in groups of 4 now, a violation of Rule 5. I'd strayed onto a false trail, but I had no idea how to find the correct path in this twisted version of reality. The forest had become a labyrinth designed to trap me. In desperation, I pulled out my compass, hoping for some objective measure of direction in this shifting landscape. The needle spun wildly, sometimes completing full rotations before settling briefly in a new orientation, then spinning again. Think, Jenkins. What would Mike, the real Mike, do? I forced myself to stop and regulate my breathing. Panic was the enemy now. The silver money clip had grown hot again in my hand, almost burning. I focused on that sensation, using the pain to anchor myself. The compass continued its erratic behavior, but I noticed something. Each time the needle paused, it pointed in the same direction for a split second before resuming its spin. That couldn't be coincidence. I took a chance and moved in that direction, pushing through dense underbrush and over fallen logs. There was no trail here, but the compass needle steadied slightly with each step, its wild rotations becoming less frequent. Progress was painfully slow. The forest grew denser, more hostile. Thorny vines snagged my clothing and scratched my skin. The ground became boggy, each step requiring tremendous effort. Strange sounds echoed all around. Whispers in languages I'd never heard, mocking laughter, the crack of branches that sounded eerily like breaking bones. After what felt like hours, I stumbled onto what appeared to be a game trail. Narrow and barely visible, but a path nonetheless. The compass needle had stopped its spinning and now pointed steadily ahead. I followed this new trail as it wound through increasingly unfamiliar terrain. The vegetation changed, becoming more primordial. Ferns grew chest-high, mosses glowed with faint bioluminescence, fungi the size of dinner plates clung to massive tree trunks. Just as my strength was about to give out, I spotted light ahead, the warm yellow glow of a cabin window. Relief flooded through me. Somehow, against all odds, I'd found my way back. I staggered the final 100 yards, practically falling against the cabin door. My hands shook so badly I could barely work the latch. When I finally tumbled inside and slammed the door behind me, the contrast between the nightmare forest and the cabin's mundane interior was so stark I nearly wept. But my relief was short-lived. This wasn't my cabin. The layout was the same, single room with a wood stove, table, chairs, but everything was subtly wrong. The furniture was positioned differently. The supplies on the shelves were brands I didn't recognize, with packaging in a language that resembled English but wasn't quite right. Photos hung on the walls showing people in Forest Service uniforms, one of which looked exactly like me, standing next to a version of Mike that seemed alive and well. A logbook lay open on the table. I approached cautiously and read the last entry, dated today. Encounter with boundary breach at Tinker Cliffs. Entity attempted to cross using modified silver conductor. Containment successful but difficult. Entity displayed unprecedented adaptation to our rules. Require immediate reinforcement at North Junction. Jenkins. The handwriting was mine, but I hadn't written this. Cold realization washed over me. I wasn't back at my cabin. I'd crossed over somehow, into the world Mike's entity had been trying to reach. Or perhaps a third reality altogether. The compass in my hand had stopped working completely, its needle hanging limp. The silver money clip had cooled, now feeling like ordinary metal. A sound outside made me freeze. Footsteps on the porch, followed by the rattle of the doorknob. I looked frantically for somewhere to hide, but the cabin offered no concealment. The door swung open, and I found myself face to face with myself. The other Jenkins showed no surprise at seeing me. He, or it, simply nodded as if confirming a suspicion, then spoke in my exact voice. "You've broken Rule 9. You've seen yourself on the trail." "This isn't the trail," I managed to respond, backing away until I hit the wall. "It's all the trail," my doppelganger replied cryptically. "Different paths, same boundary." "What are you?" I demanded, clutching the now useless silver money clip. "I'm you." He set down his pack and removed his hat. "Just not the version that's supposed to be in this sector." "I don't understand." "You will." He gestured to the logbook. "Read the earlier entries. All of them, not just the ones you were allowed to see in your reality." Keeping my eyes on my double, I reached for the book and flipped back through the pages. What I read turned my blood to ice. The boundary must be maintained at all costs. Each ranger is assigned a specific reality sector to patrol. Rangers must never encounter versions of themselves from other sectors. This creates instability in the boundary. Silver conducts energy between sectors but does not allow physical crossing. Physical crossing requires the breaking of at least 3 rules simultaneously at a thin point. If crossed into another sector, Rangers must locate their counterpart and establish communication. Only by synchronized rule breaking in parallel sectors can a Ranger return to their assigned reality. I looked up at my doppelganger, understanding dawning. You're not a walker. You're me from this reality. He nodded. And you're me from Sector 7B. Blackwood is my supervisor too, though my version is still alive after the encounter at Tinker Cliffs. The entity that looked like Mike wasn't Mike, my double confirmed. It's something that lives in the gaps between sectors. It feeds on boundary crossings, grows stronger each time the rules are broken. It takes forms familiar to us, using our memories, our trust. What happened to the real Mike? A shadow crossed my double's face. He learned too much, crossed too many times trying to map the sectors. In the end, he couldn't find his way back to his original reality. He paused. Some versions of him are still out there, lost between sectors, fragmented. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed. So the rules really are protection. Yes and no. They maintain the boundaries between sectors, keep the entities confined to the gaps, but they also keep us separated, isolated in our individual realities. He sat across from me. Some believe that's by design, that someone or something wants humanity fragmented across infinite, nearly identical realities. Blackwood is a warden, existing in all sectors simultaneously, maintaining the boundaries. My double leaned forward. The wardens aren't human, but they're not our enemies either. They're more like immune responses to boundary violations. Outside, the forest had gone completely silent. Even the usual sounds of night creatures had ceased. Something was coming. We don't have much time, my doppelganger said urgently. The entity is still hunting you, and your presence here is causing instability. How do I get back? We need to break the same rule, in the same place, at the same time. Create a synchronized tear that will allow you to slip back into your proper sector. He checked his watch. We have about 10 minutes before the boundary repair mechanisms activate and strand you here permanently. He stood and grabbed his pack. Bring the silver. We'll need it to focus the crossing point. As we stepped onto the porch, I saw the forest had changed again. The trees had grown impossibly tall, their canopies forming a cathedral-like dome overhead. The stars visible through gaps in the leaves were arranged in constellations I'd never seen before. My double pointed to a faint path leading into the darkened forest. That's our way back to Tinker Cliffs. Back there? After what just happened? It's the thinnest point between our sectors right now. He handed me a flashlight. Just remember, follow the rules until the exact moment we need to break them. Together, we headed into the woods, 2 versions of the same ranger navigating a boundary never meant to be crossed, with something ancient and hungry hunting us from the spaces in between. 3 months have passed since that night on Tinker Cliffs. 3 months since my double and I synchronized our actions to tear a hole in the boundary large enough for me to slip back through. 3 months since I returned to find Blackwood, my Blackwood, waiting at the cabin, his silver badge glowing with an unearthly light as he sealed the breach behind me. I still patrol the Appalachian Trail, but with a different understanding of my role. The special unit isn't just about helping lost hikers or maintaining trail markers. We're boundary wardens, maintaining the walls between countless parallel realities, what my double called sectors. Blackwood explained it to me the morning after my return, his normally stoic demeanor softened by something like respect. Every reality, every version of Earth has its own Appalachian Trail, he said. In each one, the trail follows slightly different paths, has different hikers, different rangers, but they all overlap at certain points. Thin spots where the boundaries can be crossed if you know how. And the rules, I asked, are the same in every sector. They've been refined over centuries to maintain separation between realities while allowing the wardens to move between them when necessary. I now understand that the walker I saw wasn't trying to replace me. It was a version of me from another sector, trying to communicate across the boundary. The hikers in red are entities that exist between sectors, feeding on boundary energy. The backwards walking figures are echoes of people moving in opposite time flows in adjacent realities. I keep my silver money clip with me always, not because it repels anything, but because it helps me sense when the boundary grows thin. On certain nights, especially during the full moon, I can feel it grow warm against my skin. A warning that somewhere nearby the walls between worlds are weakening. Mike's file has been reclassified. No longer listed as a walker encounter, it now reads CSE Cross-Sector Entanglement. Blackwood won't tell me exactly what happened, but I've pieced together enough to know that Mike discovered how to intentionally cross between sectors. He became obsessed with mapping them, with finding ways to reunite the fragmented versions of humanity. But each crossing fractured his identity a little more, leaving pieces of himself scattered across multiple realities. The entity that impersonated him at Tinker Cliffs had collected those fragments, using them to create a convincing facsimile. As for my double, my other self in that parallel sector, we've established a tentative method of communication. Silver conducts more than just energy between realities. On the first of each month, at precisely midnight, I leave a note rolled tightly around my money clip, placed inside a hollow tree near McAfee Knob. By morning, the note is gone, replaced by one from him. Small updates, warnings about boundary thinning in our respective sectors, theories about the true nature of the entities that live in the spaces between. Never anything that would violate protocol or risk another crossing. Tonight, I begin training a new ranger for the special unit, a promising young woman named Lisa Chen, who demonstrated remarkable intuition during a boundary fluctuation near Dragon's Tooth last week. I'll teach her the 9 rules, emphasize their importance, but also help her understand their deeper purpose. Because the true horror isn't what lurks in the forest after dark. It's not the voices that call your name or the doppelgangers that wear your face. The true horror is the fragmentation. Billions of nearly identical Earths, each with its own version of humanity, separated by boundaries we're forbidden to cross. Each reality believing it's the only one, never knowing what or who exists just on the other side of a rule carefully followed. And sometimes, on those nights when the boundary grows thin and my silver grows warm, I find myself wondering, what would happen if all those rules were broken at once?